I see dead people. Yeah, I know that sounds crazy to some of you, but it's the truth. My first experience seeing the dead happened when I was a preteen. Me and my family were visiting some other family members down in North Carolina. When it was time to go to bed, we were put up in the spare bedroom in the attic space. As I'm laying there, I'm facing this open doorway. And in that doorway, I see the figure of a man. He kind of looks like a shadowy figure, and he's just standing there as if watching myself and the other members of my family. This went on for well over 30 minutes, I believe. Now, after a while, I knew this couldn't just be like a man, right? It wasn't someone just standing there from the household. And how I was able to determine that is, I believe there was a thunderstorm that night. So occasionally lightning would flash, right, and would illuminate the room. And whenever lightning would illuminate the room, the only thing that was not illuminated was that being. I didn't see any features, right? So imagine usually when light floods the room, if someone's standing across the room, when the light hits them, you'll see their features. This being, this entity had no features because it was a shadow being. And it stood there and it stood there. And it wasn't until later in life that I realized, oh shit, that was the first memory I have of seeing spirit. Welcome to the Gorgeous Guru podcast. I'm your host, Day, the Gorgeous Guru. If you're craving real talk, inspiration, and soulful guidance, you found it. So tune in, get comfortable, and get ready to be inspired. Hey, y'all, welcome in. So in honor of Halloween, I've decided that I'm going to tell my ghost stories. Not ghost stories that I've seen on TV, not ones that have been passed down from others, but ghost stories I've actually lived. As I've gotten older and more in tune with my intuition and my intuitive gifts, my ability to see spirit has grown so much. And what I've learned about seeing spirit is that certain places on the planet are actually spiritual hotspots, places where the dead reside, or portals where they're passing through. I've lived in 2 hotspots over the course of my life. The first hotspot was Red Hook Houses or Red Hook Projects in Brooklyn, where I grew up. This is such an active place spiritually. And as I've grown intuitively and spent more time there, oh my gosh, y'all. When I say I would see spirits multiple times a week, it was just like a common occurrence. And at one point I had to turn my ability off so I could have peace at night. I grew up in this apartment, but I don't remember seeing spirits there when I was a child, right? But from what I hear, I would wake my dad up almost every night and tell him I was seeing things, and he would come and sit by my bed until I fell asleep. So shout out to my dad for that. Because who wants to get up? Who wants to get up every night to deal with that? Shout out to my dad. I appreciate that. But now thinking back, I wonder if I was actually seeing spirit, and that's why I would wake him up. And before I go on, I want to explain something to you that I've noticed about seeing spirit. For me, it's easier for me to see spirit during certain times, and those times are right as I'm going to sleep, right? So it's like when I'm crossing over from wakefulness to my sleep, or when I'm waking up from my sleep. There's something about those periods where it makes it easier to peer through the veil, like you're able to see through the veil more easily. And even though I'm in between my my waking state and my sleep state, I promise y'all, I do not be asleep. I'll be awake when I have these experiences. So most of the stories I'm going to tell today are stories that occurred in that state in between being awake, right, and falling asleep, or coming up out of my sleep. So one of the most memorable experiences I've had in Red Hook that first hot spot, is one night I could not sleep. Y'all, I'm like chasing sleep, tossing and turning, and I was kind of shocked that I couldn't sleep. There was no reason for me not to be able to sleep. The reason I couldn't sleep is because I was meant to see someone that night. So at one point I turn over, and sitting in front of me on this couch is a figure sitting cross-legged, what we used to call Indian style, on a couch. This figure is wearing white from head to toe, a white cap, white shirt, white pants, and I know it's a man, and this man's skin is a blue hue. You know how sometimes in Hindu drawings they'll paint the gods and goddesses blue, like blue skinned? That's how this figure looked. The figure looks at me, taps his heart 3 times, and then vanishes. I sit up and I say, oh shit. Because this was one of the first times I saw an entity, an energy, right? A spirit while I was awake, right? Not coming out of my sleep, I couldn't go to sleep. I'm awake and I was able to see this figure. I'm not gonna lie, y'all, I was scared. And I had seen spirits before, but it was just so close and vivid. And like I said, I knew it couldn't have been a dream or anything. It was like I was awake. At first, I didn't know who it was because of the blue skin. I was like, wait, who could that be? Because it felt like a personal message when the person gestured and tapped his heart. He was showing me love. So it had to be someone who knows me, knows of me, that I probably have known. And it dawns on me. One of my spiritual mentors and teachers, only knew him a short time, but he made such a powerful impact in my life. His name was Grandmaster Calm. He had a spiritual shop in Brooklyn in Bed-Stuy. And, I would stop by sometimes when I was living out there and talk to him. And, he was like into meditation, and he always wore the color white because he was a child of the Orisha or Batala. I'm like, wait a minute, it's Grandmaster. A couple of months before that experience, he had passed away, and he came to visit me, and him tapping his heart was showing me love. Iba, Grandmaster Calm, I pay homage to the man that I knew as Grandmaster Calm. Such a powerful being, powerful man. Love you, Grandmaster. One of the scariest moments I've had, guys, there's been a couple, but in terms of this particular hot spot, there was a night I woke up and at the end of my bed, the edge of my bed, right, by my feet, I see a male figure. He's standing there, he's rocking back and forth. For some reason, some spirits rock. At the moment, I didn't know he was a spirit. I honestly thought it was one of my family members, that maybe they were passing by to go to another room or whatever. So I say, hey, and the figure walks into another room. So I get up and follow the figure. I think maybe it's one of my family members who sometimes sleepwalks or something, right? So I follow that figure and I go into the other room. Y'all, nobody is there. There's no one there. You could not tell me there wasn't one of my family members. And again, it's dark, right? So I couldn't tell exactly who it was. I'm thinking it's one of my male family members. Maybe they were sleepwalking or standing there. So when I go to follow the energy, the spirit into the other room, they are gone. Things like this were a common occurrence in Red Hook. And a part of me wants to do some research on this area of Brooklyn, because why is it so active? I know before the European settlers moved there, Native Americans lived there. I don't know if this was a place where there was war. I don't know if the projects, the public housing complex is built on burial grounds or something, sacred ground. But it's just a lot of energy in that space. Hotspot number 2, Flatbush, Brooklyn. But Flatbush near Prospect Park. So I lived in like 3 different apartments in Flatbush. My last apartment in Flatbush was close to Prospect Park, like literally down the block. And that was one of my favorite places. I was like, oh, I'm going to live there one day, and I did. I got to live there. And I love the park. I love being able to go and just be in natural space, a natural space regularly. Flatbush is where I actually began as an adult having these consistent experiences. I started having these experiences where I was visited by a tall, darker-skinned man with a bald head, and he would have this little light-skinned girl with him. And sometimes I would be like, man, that little light-skinned girl reminds me of me. She's not me as a child, but she reminds me of how I looked as a child. I would wake up, y'all, and this man would just be in my room with the little girl. And this was a common occurrence in that apartment. I remember one day my ex-boyfriend got so scared because he said while I was sleeping, so I must have been taking a nap or something, my cat came and stood over me as if it was protecting me and started looking at something that he couldn't see and hissing and, like really angry. And my ex was like, what the hell was that cat looking at? But that's in this apartment. Could have been that man, like there was always, again, in this place, there was always something happening. So this was either a portal or a place where the dead reside. The most frightening experience in that apartment is something that I still have difficulty describing. I would wake up and there would be this beam of light. Say it's like a stream or a string of light. And it would be moving and contorting itself into different shapes. And it was always right in front of my face. So I would wake up and this thing is right above me in my face and it's making these different shapes and I'm like swinging at it like, get the hell out of my face, And till this day, I'm like, what the hell was that? I've never seen a spirit present itself as a stream of a light. But in this particular location, that's how it presented. And it would scare the shit out of me, y'all, because it was always right up on me. And one thing about me, I don't like spirits right up on me. I'm just not into it. So my neighbor in that building would often ask me, as I would tell her these stories, she was like, girl, you didn't run? You didn't get up and leave? What's wrong with you? And I found it funny. It's like, why would I run or leave? Like, I've built my life here. I pay rent. The spirits ain't paying no damn rent. They ain't helping with nothing. I'm not leaving. And my brother, he clowns me because one time I was somewhere and this spirit told me to get out. And I said, the fuck? This ain't Amityville. You get out. You don't pay no bills here. What I look like? And my brother was dying. He said, Day, how you going to argue with a ghost? I'm like, whatever. When you start helping with some bills, you could tell me to get out. Hell out of here. So where I live now, thankfully, there's not much activity. I wouldn't call this a hotspot. It's very quiet. The only thing about this location is that, honey, one day I was talking to my mom and a spirit pops into the doorway like it's listening to us and then pops out. And I had to stop and be like, because I'm looking right at the doorway and it happens so quickly. But it's like I see the figure, they pop in like they're listening to our conversation, pop out. I said, wait a minute. I said, Ma, did you see somebody just step in the doorway? And she was like, no. I said, oh my God. I said, man, like seeing them during the day is always a little bit more jarring because I'm so used to seeing them at night. But that's like one of the only experiences I've had here. I've also had some spirits interview me when I first moved in. They wanted to know where I came from, why I was here. And they seem to be the friendly spirits. So that was really cool. To be honest, it's much quieter than living in Brooklyn. Brooklyn is very active, to say the least. So the most difficult thing about having this ability to see spirit and to hear from spirit, because I also hear from spirit, is that as an empath, I'm very sensitive to energy. I can feel emotion. I can feel if someone or an energy is angry or sad or even really excited. So I'm able to pick up on the pain and disappointment sometimes that these spirits feel and are dealing with. It's been very important for me to get still, right? To get still and get very familiar with my own energy so that when that happens, I'm not just taking on their emotions and acting like it's my own, because sometimes that can happen. Unconsciously, you'll absorb the emotions and energy and you can think it's yours, but I'm getting much better at identifying what's my energy and what's not. There are no Gorgeous Guru prompts this week since this was more of a story time episode. If you're enjoying the podcast, consider becoming a monthly supporter of the show. All of your donations are a great help. You can sign up at thegorgeousgurupodcast.com. Thank you so much for joining me today. You could have spent this time doing anything, but you decided to spend it with me, and I am grateful. I hope you'll join me next time.